couple of questions because there are many ways to do this workshop. I'd also kind of like to know a little background of the participants. Here's the book. Has anyone read Sergei Prokofiev? Have you read this book? Yeah? Did you like it?
I read it.
You read it? Read? No one else? Okay. And I'll explain why I chose him. This is basically an anthroposophical area, so I thought I would connect it to what people have some background in. Let's see, what can I tell you about myself? I currently live in Hawaii. I recently started giving lectures in Honolulu and LA. I'm going back to LA. And I give lectures mainly on Steiner's writing style, forgiveness, and then a new one I'm doing is on spiritual notions of sexuality, which is a hard lecture to do in anthroposophical circles. It doesn't always get the warm embrace you think it might get. Which is okay. We'll see over time. Did everyone get a hand up? Yeah, we're okay? Okay, let me get a little grounded here. It takes me a couple seconds to stop being nervous. So, the reason why I give this workshop is because I've had about 15 years of experience working on forgiveness. And actually, what I'd like to do with you is not only tell you just a theoretical background, I would like to show you how you can actually develop a practice. The reason why I give this workshop is, according to Prokofiev, even according to Rudolf Steiner, who gave very few concrete suggestions about forgiveness, it's really misunderstood. So there's the normal notion of forgiveness. You kind of forget that the person did anything wrong. You let someone off the hook. There's a reason why we think that, and I'm going to go into all these concepts slowly. What I'd like you to do is just look at these words. Look at them, and I'd like you to reconsider them at the end of the lecture. So I have surrender, release, gentleness, crying, liver. Doesn't seem like it fits, but we'll get there. Expectation, disease, and light body. And I hope by the end of this workshop, you'll have a notion of why these words are important. And by mentioning these words, maybe something in your soul will unravel a bit. Let me get started. The first question I have to ask you, my workshops are not really so informational. So my first question is everyone willing to make a change in themselves tonight, even ever so slight? Is that a reasonable question? Okay, good. So there are three authors, all of whom I love. I love Rudolf Steiner. I was studying his works starting in my 20s. I went to Germany and also studied Rudolf Steiner's work in Stuttgart and Tübingen, even in Freiburg. I joined the study group in a Christian community study group. I stayed in Germany and I was a student of Florian Launce and Frank Teichmann, who are excellent teachers, both of them, and I had a personal relationship and a mentor relationship with Florian. So I got to know the 6 exercises, and I don't know if anyone else is familiar with his works. And he was a great teacher because he really practiced. And I love that about him. So when I go to places, he's always been my standard of someone who practices what they preach. He doesn't say, kind of, you should know this, but how do you do this? And he was just really great in that way. So I appreciated that. Not everybody gets that chance to study in Germany. The most important thing with these authors, when you read them carefully, especially Michael Rice, who I'll probably introduce to some of you for the first time, is they all challenge you to improve yourself. So you know, if you read any of Steiner's basic books, again and again, he raises the bar, like Knowledge of Higher Worlds. It's probably one of the best books ever written. again and again exercises where you are forced to change. I don't know if you're familiar with the book, but when you look at someone, you look at the higher. If you have a negative thought, you look for something positive, like great sweater, as opposed to focusing on my lower inclinations to criticize, things like that. What makes Prokofiev special is Prokofiev didn't write this book for everyone. He wrote this book for anthroposophists, and when you read the book very closely, he had a sense that since the very inception of the Anthroposophical Society, instead of forgiving each other, the members fought. And I don't know, anybody familiar with Mount Athos, where the Orthodox monks have their 18 monasteries? One of the rules in Mount Athos, which I found fascinating, is you can't fight with anyone. So if you can't fight with anyone, what do you do when you're angry, right? So there's some understanding that if you have the need to fight and argue, it's about yourself. It's really brilliant. Imagine if they had that as a Bible in a Waldorf school. We'd all be just wandering, trying to fight with someone. We'd have to go out into nature maybe and yell at the rocks. My path with forgiveness, and I'll just tell you a little anecdote, hopefully, so this doesn't remain too much here up in the clouds, was I had a work colleague, and my work colleague was really different. And at the time I was seeing a healer, massage therapist who did very deep body work, and the massage therapist said, no. When you stand in front of this person, I want you to breathe, stay open, and love them. And I was sure this person was wrong. And then on top, she gave me, which you guys have a package of here, something called a forgiveness sheet. And this person, by anyone's standard, was difficult to have in the faculty. I won't go into all the details, but I promise you, you may or may not have the same reaction the rest of the faculty did to this person. So I started doing these sheets, and I started doing this practice. And one day I walked in, and do you know how sometimes you're a little bit fearful a colleague going to say something to you and you don't want to go there? They walked up to me and they kind of shook their head and then walked away. I was like, oh my God, did I change or did she change? Right? So I was committed to this process of forgiveness. It was the first proof. It was a real blessing I had. Because when this lady showed up, my stomach muscles tightened up, my neck tightened up, and these tightenings in our body, like you can see my not perfect posture in spite of all the money my parents spent on my Waldorf education, these are results of thoughts we have, right? So as our thoughts kind of start to crystallize, they start to change us physically. And it doesn't have to be posture, it can also be disease. And I'm going to touch on all these ideas once and then come back to them. So what this early forgiveness process taught me to do is that when I had a hard time with someone, I had to say, I have the problem. I couldn't be smug anymore. So every time I found myself upset, jealous, any feeling, our feeling life becomes our indicator, I knew I had work to do. And that's very hard to admit. I think you'll know. And by the end of the evening, we'll be doing some of these exercises together. This is called the practice of forgiveness, and I would like just to connect this. I had a choice between logos and Tao, or as the Taoist expression. Is everybody familiar with that Chinese term? Right, what does it mean?
The way.
The way, right? And the way to where?
Nowhere. It's just the way.
It's just the way. Okay.
Just the way.
So the basic principle, excuse me, I'm no super Taoist, but is that as things become physical, they start to splinter into many parts. So yin and yang, and then further development. And the more the Tao becomes manifest, the more parts there are, or polarities. So if you have yin and yang, or male and female, Now, what does the way, where should the way lead us back to in the Taoist path? Yeah. So, we had a necessary separation, and male and female somehow have to figure not to keep splitting up and arguing, but somehow to come together and practice unity. And where do the Taoists recommend you do most of that male and female unity? Any guess? Yes? Don't be shy.
Marriage?
Yeah, in bed. Right. So the Taoists treat sexuality very hygienically, right? So the man is supposed to kind of, what's the word? He has to control his urge to orgasm and just take care of the female. That's basically what it's about. And keep pulling his energies up so he develops a light body eventually, or his shen. And in that way, when the male really loves and takes care of the female, then they become one, and they're connected with the Tao. And so the Tao is a commitment to a path to unity. And if I dare say, forgiveness is the same. So whether you're making love or not, some of you have been married, you don't always want to sleep with your partner, but sometimes you do in spite of all the grudges you hold, right? So the Chinese were still wise on some level, that they knew that you can quickly move beyond some of your differences through sexuality. Tonight we're going to not do that, but we're going to do forgiveness. So here's a question for you. What happens if you maintain excuse my spelling, a consistent frequency of love? Do you know anyone who maintains a consistent frequency of love? What's an experience that you have, maybe as a mom, who always loves you, happy to see you every time? The child, right? The newborn. So we do have an example of what it's like, no matter what happens. Yes?
An example is a teacher who's successful.
Okay, right?
You know, people who always love their students, doesn't matter. They behave crazy. High school students, times low school, they may be crazy. But if the teacher loves them, we had a teacher who had 30 kids in the class, nobody else could. She had no problem. She always said, oh, that was so wonderful.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's people who can do it, right? So, and this is kind of like the Tao principle. Now, what happens when you can't maintain that constant and consistent frequency of love? What happens to you? Where do you go when you're not in a loving space?
You're in the shadow.
Okay, and what does the shadow feel like usually?
Not fun.
Yeah, it's not fun, right? So you have basically the newborn versus the shadow, or pain. And the pain can take the form of fear or hostility, right? Why did Jesus say you should forgive somebody 70 times 7 times? Do you know what some Christians say? Jesus said forgive 70 times 7 times. Once you get past all the numerology games that some scholars play, why did he say that? Is that hyperbole? Or was he a Taoist of forgiveness? Did you see what I'm getting at? If you're upset with someone, in the normal concept of forgiveness, you can either forget what happened, suppress it, or you can actually somehow forgive. And if you're so successful that you can forgive at your first attempt at loving someone, that's an unbelievable achievement. So let's say if we take Jesus' words literally, it's something that you do, basically you have to do chronically or often enough that there's an effect in your life, that it's not hyperbole, it's just the beginning. So just when you think you've finished something, something else comes up that tests you. So it's like a kind of a state of mind, a state of being that you're always almost like a detective of forgiveness. You're going, introspecting into your soul, and wherever the feelings are not feelings that stem from love, they could be jealousy, anger, all of those, you have forgiveness work to do. So if you look at the quote, I gave you the Bible quote, I gave you 4 quotes that I thought pretty much carry the evening. Peter said to him, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but to 70 times 7, right? So tonight we're going to be working with this attitude that it's actually not, it's not what you think it is. Forgiveness is not just simply letting someone off the hook, but going deeper into yourself. Let's give a little look. So if you have 3 types of people, you have a victim. How do you spell perpetrator?
E-O.
Yeah. You're great, thank you. You have a victim, you have a perpetrator. And the last one, you basically have self-blame. So in terms of forgiveness, what would the victim look like? What's a feeling a victim would have?
I mean,
Yeah, but more concretely, not an idea, but what's a typical feeling that you have as a victim when someone hurts you?
You feel sorry.
Okay, sorry. Anything else? Guilt? Yeah, why guilt?
Sorry for yourself or?
Yeah, for self, could be any of the above, right?
Also a feeling of powerlessness.
Okay, powerlessness,
Fear.
fear, right? Now, most people focus on this idea of victim. And Prokofiev has an excellent example. He has, of all things, he has 2 Holocaust survivors. One Holocaust survivor is a Jewish doctor, Polish descent. His family is slaughtered in front of him by the Nazis. He goes to the camp, and then he finds out that he makes a decision not to hate the Germans. And in spite of being on a starvation diet, he looks great. He's helpful to everybody. He almost becomes a kind of authority in the camp, even amongst the Germans. When the Americans discover this man, he's in perfect health. How did he do it? Right? He has no malice. He's able to stay kind of in forgiveness, not because he forgave the people that shot his family, but because he chose to be forgiveness. That's kind of where we want to go. That's the ultimate. He's the king. If I could be him, I would be so happy. I don't want anyone to shoot my family just yet, but I'm not ready for that test. But then Prokofiev takes another example, is Wiesenthal. Everybody know Wiesenthal? The Nazi hunter. I guess he wrote that book.
Simon.
Yeah, Simon Wiesenthal. Simon Wiesenthal, one time, he lived in, I guess, Ukraine, Poland during the Holocaust. And he was working in a hospital, and a German soldier who had helped murder a synagogue full of Jews had a horrible conscience, and he asked for a Jew to come up to his bedside to kind of have a moment of forgiveness. And Wiesenthal, as a young man, I guess, comes up, and the German soldier tells him what he did, and Wiesenthal couldn't go there. He didn't have an answer for the German. And Prokofiev says, that's what we're like. Very few of us is that Polish doctor who is able to live in forgiveness. Most of us are like Wiesenthal. oh, you know, I can't forgive because this has to come first, and this, but this person was wrong, and then your intellect gets in the way. And it's very interesting because, you know, normally people associate in some way, you know, the Jews as unforgiving. But Prokofiev uses really two juxtaposed, kind of like the archetypal human being who forgives everyone, and Wiesenthal, who actually represents all of us. Our inability to live in forgiveness, to stay in our intellect, to project. And the interesting thing is, in this whole concept, it's not so much about reconciliation. Reconciliation is great. You know, if I do something wrong, I can try to fix it and repair it. But that's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is a soul state. And I'll get into that a little more in a second. Let's go to perpetrator. Has anyone done anything that they regretted? Yeah? What's the perpetrator's basic feeling? What do you feel after you do something mean? Something you shouldn't have said, right? That's mine. So there's shame. Why did God make shame? Did he really think we were strong enough to overcome shame? What's another feeling that it's hard to overcome? Shame? What else is really horrible?
I let down my folks. You know, if I
let people down?
Let people down. I mean, I think that I was taught, you know, to be honest and not steal anything, and then I took something I shouldn't have taken.
Right?
And I felt, you know, terribly guilty about that.
And God invented guilt, right? So we would learn how to maybe not hurt each other. Did that work well for us? Yeah, it starts when you're a little kid.
So a little candy. But I mean,
you're going to hell, right? But that's how it is as a perpetrator. But think of other things, you know, I mean, not everybody wants to talk about the fight they had where they punched that person, or maybe some of us were at war and had to kill people that we didn't mean to do, right? And those tear you apart. You don't just let those go. You know, I remember a psychoanalyst said to me, oh, you know why that murderer keeps repeating? The guilt kills him. People think murderers have no sense of guilt. That's one theory. One theory is the guilt is so unbearable that in order to get any kind of relief from the guilt, they have to commit another crime. You know, you ever get caught stealing like a candy bar and people catch you and you're like, why did they do that? Oh, you know. And then you want to kind of make them change their mind that they didn't see you, and you're willing to shake them maybe, you know? Something like that, that the guilt propels you to do other stupid things, right? So that's the perpetrator. These are very, very, you know, so you have these involved, these other guys dealing with murder, but let's get, most of us don't kill all the time, or at least not in this life, right?
All the time.
Right. Now remember, if you committed murder in the last life, and you didn't forgive yourself, you're still going to carry that. Well, why do you think you're not going to carry guilt from a last life? That doesn't go away. It would be nice if it did. And what about self-blame? This is a tough one. What would be an example of self-blame? Because this is a lack of forgiveness.
well, you look back on the difficulties you've had, and you always thought it was the other person. And then eventually you get some perspective and you see you were definitely involved, and maybe you named one involved.
And how would you summarize? What would be a feeling that comes from self-blame? Now we have shame and guilt. What else belongs to self-blame? What other type of feeling?
Disappointment.
Yeah, disappointment, right? Low self-esteem. This is a very big one for a lot of people, is a sense of failure. Right? You think Rudolf Steiner, did he feel like a failure when he died? What do you think?
If you what?
Did you think Rudolf Steiner felt like a failure? Something to think about, right? There's some theories about that. The guy who worked so hard, had the highest ideals, didn't necessarily come together the way it's supposed to, right? You could be really hard on yourself. Right? So these are all realities that we deal with. This is kind of looking at our soul.
The word deserve, for some reason, keeps coming up with something.
So,
deserving of the negative.
Undeserving or deserving negative? Deserving negative is even better, self-punishment, right?
Mm-hmm.
for a second, and it is very interesting because what I hope tonight to get you to hear is when someone's talking to you and they're telling you a story. When someone tells you a story over and over again, the story of their life, any story about work, I've heard that story once. Now I've heard it for the 60th time. And then you think, wow, if that person really understood the forgiveness process, they wouldn't tell their story. Doesn't it get tiring hearing the same? I heard my mom's story sometimes. I love my mom. Her story's a hard story. She keeps telling it. Why do we keep telling it? Do we think it gives you relief? And I'll be honest, with Rudolf Steiner, Prokofiev, and Michael Rice, they're taskmasters. You don't tell your story. Once enough. The psychoanalyst doesn't want to hear it, none of your friends. This is the way to find that relief you're looking for. So I'll climb into there in a second. Any questions about this before I go on to the next segment? Yes?
It's not so much a question, and I don't mean to be god-awfully anthroposophical.
No, go ahead. Enjoy.
But the fellow was a lawyer.
He was not a doctor.
Not a doctor. It's the best lawyer story ever. I
Forgiving lawyer?
say that.
Okay, no, thank you. Yeah, it's been a while since I read this story. I think it was Prokofiev's book or someone else. Any other questions here?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Victim, perpetrator is usually rescuer.
Okay. Rescue is going to be a reaction too. I'm going to give you a feeling list. These are all really important because I'll tell you now, and I'll try to repeat this as many times before the end of the evening. Normally a person has one theme. So you could do 1,000 forgiveness sheets, but there's one central theme, musical tone in your soul that needs healing. And when you get to that, whether it's saving people, saving yourself, mine, when I was a child, I was called stupid a lot. So everything I did tried to prove I was, so then you'll see the sheets have to do with self-esteem going back to that one thing. And then I was like, wow, this doesn't look related, but it is. There's usually one central theme that we all have, one note. And when you sit quietly, you'll ask, what is my central theme? And you'll hear it in the way you treat people, right? Rescuing or whatever. And you don't want to do that.
So you're equating rescuing with self-blame.
No. Just that wherever you are, once you clear these categories, because all of these self-blame, perpetrator, victim, they don't matter. What matters is what's going on in here. And you usually find it's one central thing. And it could be, as I'll get into later, if you understand genetics a little bit, especially in the new way people are talking about it, or in the biblical way, you carry the sins of your father. Whole nations can be sinful, and you pass those. You're given those characteristics to rework. It's one thing. You think anthroposophically, I chose this ethnic group, and this is great. But you also chose to work within a group and ennoble that group. That when you do this forgiveness work, remember this forgiveness work is a path. Hopefully, this is not information. I know I'm successful on some level if I can get you guys to do this work together by yourself, because when you do it, when you start to release these things, you're also releasing them from your blood. Blood is a spiritual substance. That frequency of guilt depends what ethnic group you're in, right? Some of them have this way to handle problems, some of them have a schizoid way, some have a depressing way. Each group has its own dynamic. So what you're hopefully going to do by practicing this work, you're going to actually free up the people around you. Now that could take a couple of years, but we will get there. Forgiveness will win. Love always wins, right? So, yeah, at least we better hope so. Any other questions? Yes?
This so reminds me of Ho'oponopono.
Right. It's no different. There's, most of these people work with kind of what Jesus Christ did. What did he do? He reminded us how important forgiveness was. But, the Hawaiians themselves, they knew about Christ, directly or indirectly. They work in those energies. Now, what they don't have is the formulations in the same way. But all that, Ho'oponopono, I can't even say it correctly, and I live in Hawaii. Right, it's similar in some ways. What Michael Rice does is he makes it a little bit more storytelling, as opposed to, Some people who practice that have these very kind of short solutions, which are good. Sometimes they work because you're just sending positive energy. But this one, we're also going to analyze what we do in our feeling life. There's also the Lady Byron Katie is similar. So they're all similar. But then she doesn't go into one further step, which is asking for divine intervention. You can do it on your own, but there's that next step where you ask your higher self, your angels, to step in, which they don't always do. So I hope it gives that extra kick. Everybody look at this quote. Yes?
All right, I had an involved conversation with Paul Sharp revolving around guilt. And he very clearly, very succinctly said, it's a healthy moral response. It's what you do with it where the trouble starts.
Right.
Guilt is a healthy response to something, whatever.
You know what I imagine? I think he's right, of course, on some level. But I think kind of like when God made man, he gave him testosterone so he'd be interested in procreating, but the underside he's also interested in fighting. And I imagine God thought that men would just learn to love faster and they wouldn't, start raping and killing each other. So I think there's some truth to that. But on the other hand, any prolonged guilt is so devastating. It doesn't lead anywhere. And it rarely changes people's behavior. And it rarely leads to unity because it's such a negative concept. I think sometimes I say to myself, if that person had a healthy sense of shame, maybe they wouldn't talk that way. I'm talking about myself. But yeah, that's a debatable question. Yeah, we'll have to talk to Paul again. Everybody look at that quote with Rudolf Steiner. This is one of my favorite quotes. Again, Rudolf Steiner, he sums up this whole process in one sentence, or one paragraph, in ways no one else can. I just love him. I found this much later, and when I found it, I was very pleased that Steiner actually said it. And he says, if I'm a teacher, and my pupil does not fulfill my expectations, I must not divert my resentment against him, but against myself. I must feel as one with my pupil, to the extent of asking myself, is my pupil's deficiency not the result of my own action? Instead of directing my feelings against him, I shall rather reflect on my own attitude so that the pupil may, in the future, be better able to satisfy my demands. So what are the stages in that, according to Rudolf Steiner? What's the first thing that you do? So you're a teacher, right? What did you do? So you have a relationship with your pupil. Sorry if people think a little antiquated vocabulary, it's the British translation. So what happens here? What's the sequence of event? Number one.
You're feeling with the pupil.
Okay, so number one, the pupil has an action, right? And number one, what do you have a feeling of? Resentment, right? And then you have resentment, or what comes first? Is that resentment or expectation?
Expectation.
Okay, expectation. All right, let's switch them up then. So you have expectation, and what is the teacher's expectation?
That the student will get it.
That the student will get it, right? A student won't misbehave, something like that, right?
Do their work.
What's that?
Do the homework.
Do their homework. So you have an expectation. I love this. Steiner, this hit it so perfectly. So, doesn't happen. You're resentful. What does Steiner tell you to do? Look at yourself. He's a little harsh, right? He's, turn your resentment against yourself. Look at yourself. And then what's the final stage? After you look at yourself?
You look at the pupil to make sure in the future they're meeting your demands.
Okay.
Unity, feel as one with my people.
So you look at yourself, right? So there's a feeling of unity. What else?
I think he's saying you come to your pupil with
like a higher version of yourself, and not just acting out of day-to-day.
Yeah.
And take your,
So where's the mistake? Is it wrong to have an expectation? Or where's our mistake as human beings? The resentment, right? So the resentment, that's what we're dealing with, right? We're dealing with feeling. Yes?
Well, so, if you don't understand it, then I'm ready to help. You can come in after school or at lunch hour.
Right.
It's not putting the onus on them or on me, it's just a fact.
Right.
I do the best I can, you don't understand it, so let's work on it a little more together. That was always my answer. I don't know if that's bad or anything.
No. What we're looking for is we're looking for gold in our soul. So every time we find a black spot, we shouldn't be ashamed. So if I resent my pupil and I've discovered that, that's great, because I'm this close to releasing that resentment. The resentment is a projection. Because even if someone nails you to the cross, you're not supposed to really stop loving them, right? We have different levels. But this is gold. We're finding out where we really are so we can improve ourselves. Does that make sense? So we're going to reverse the formula. We're not trying to hide our resentment. We're trying to look for it as much as we can. And then Steiner says, direct my feelings against them. I shall reflect on my own attitudes so that the pupil be better able to satisfy my demand. So Steiner says, you're going to have basically a new goal. It's not that you want the kid to not understand. You want him to understand or behave. But since you've gone through this process, since you're a new person who can love that child as is, you can have a new goal. What's the difference between goal and expectation? The expectation in this case is laden with your dysfunction or your feeling. The new goal is a wonderful thing to have. So for example, I met someone who said, my daughter won't have a conversation with me, right? I go, well, you got to change first. She's not going to have a conversation with you unless you change. You got to love her. You got to go through the forgiveness process. And she couldn't. And I said, you know what? Trust this process, and let's see if she actually, because your goal is good. It's a good goal to talk. Logos. We can all use our words to unify, right? That's what the world is about. We believe we can use our words to improve ourselves. But you got to come to a place here. Yes?
My experience is if you have to start off listening to somebody else. If you want them to talk to you, you got to listen to them. That's the problem with children. You don't listen to them. I think once they get to the age that they can think for themselves, you don't listen to them, they're not going to want to talk to you.
Right. And the forgiveness process is part of that. So let me just keep this as our kind of working archetype from Rudolf Steiner, is that the key thing I want you to stay awake to is the expectation. Normally, I go into a very long explanation of Prokofiev's theory of forgiveness, but tonight I'm going to cut it short, even though I really love him a lot. I love what he says, I think it's great, but for those who don't have a heavy-duty background in anthroposophy, it can be a little bit weird, but I'll touch on the fruits of what he said later, but let's just go to Prokofiev. Is everybody familiar with this concept of spirit self? Does that ring a bell in anthroposophy? Okay, for those who are not familiar, Steiner gave, out of the Hindu terminology, anybody read the Bhagavad Gita? You have the Atman and the Buddhai. It's a nice transition into anthroposophy. So you have basically, the Atman is your higher self, your Buddha is your discerning self, and your spirit self, you could think of that kind of guardian spirit part of you that translates stuff into physical action. But anyway, so in Steiner's book, you have, let's say, your I, that's higher. This is like the best of you, the wisest person. Not always unified with the person sitting in this body, but it's that part of your spiritual identity that really has kind of an awareness that we might not necessarily share. And then Prokofiev calls the lower ego. Has everybody heard of your astral body? Right, your feeling body? So your astral body works always out of kind of polarities. Oh, I love this, I hate this, I love this, I hate this. Your preferences. If you were an astral, purely astral, you would just eat what you always ate the other day, little children, something like that. So your astrality has different kinds of comforts and kind of a dreamy state. And then your lower ego is kind of your reason. And in this difference between your higher and lower ego, you have your bodily needs, I'm hungry, I'm angry, etc. And then you have your higher ego, which is trying to whisper good advice to you. And guess what? Do you listen to the good advice your higher ego is whispering to you? Not a lot, right? It's one of the reasons why you're supposed to meditate. Oh, okay, I get it now. Oh, forgive them? Oh, I can't do that. You know what she did to you last week, right? So Prokofiev says, when your spirit self, or for those not familiar, your angelic self, when that intervenes in your mind, in your brain, your astral body, all of a sudden there's a temporary break in memory. Because what does memory do to you that affects your actions? What does your past do that can have horrible consequences?
Repeat it.
Yeah, you're conditioned by your past. So your past could lie in resentment, or you could be living in the pleasures of the past. Oh, my childhood was so great, and now my life stinks. You know, there's different ways that you're not in the present. But what your higher ego does is cut you off from your past and from your brain chemistry. Because your brain chemistry is just going to do plus-minus type thinking, very built on your feelings. So then Prokofiev says, when this spirit self intervenes, forgiveness can take place. Because all of a sudden you have discernment from your higher ego. And he says, if you keep practicing this, bringing in your spirit self, and it sounds a little bit abstract, but any gentle meditation where you just even feel like your spirit self is working through you into every cell of your body, as Prokofiev says, what happens? Your aura begins to shine. If you take it a step further, Prokofiev says, and you bring in this life, spirit, Buddhai body, your chakras begin to spin. And if you're able to bring in your Atman energy into this physical body, you can walk on water, right? And then he later goes on to say, you start carrying the karma of those who you love in your circle. And after you're able to carry the karma of those you love, you can start carrying on the karma of humanity. And he says at the end of time, those people who choose this path of forgiveness will redeem what he calls kind of the bad guys, Lucifer and Ahriman. That someday they'll be like, oh, thank you, my task is over. So Prokofiev says, this simple exercises of bringing your spirit self into your body in very difficult situations is how you start to ennoble yourself and then your environment. There's no other way, he says. And he goes on to say it in about 150 pages over and over and over again. Now, if I can make a little tangent, what kind of pisses me off, and I need to do a forgiveness sheet about this, is this was never a practice in anywhere, except for Michael Rice. I mean, everything is given in this book to do this, but in no anthroposophical seminar I went to, people said, you know what, Mark, now's a good time to bring that spirit self in, right? And so I'm asking you guys, you don't have to do it right now, but we'll do it later. This is basically the theory. Every time you breathe, every time you slow down and go into gentleness, you have the opportunity to move on these astral impulses. So as we mentioned before, jealousy, irritation, fear, the only way to dissolve those is through the intervention of your spirit self. Any questions there? Don't feel bad, guys. You'll be able to do this someday. No questions?
When you say the only way is through the intervention of the spirit self,
Yes.
when you...
Oh, Prokofiev.
Oh, this is Prokofiev.
Yeah, not me.
Oh,
No, that's not the only way.
okay.
There are some ways that I would suggest are better than others, especially if you have trouble with some of these concepts. And we'll go into that in a second. Everybody look at the last quote of Michael Rice. We'll skip over the Prokofiev quote, but I put those quotes in there. You can always refer back, I hope, as a source of inspiration. Michael Rice is an interesting guy. He asked the question, what is forgiveness? He went to every book and teacher he could find, and he was never satisfied with what they said. He never felt that there's a real forgiveness process. Somehow or another, he got involved with the last group of Aramaic speakers on earth. There's not very many. And the reason why, he says later on, Aramaic is so important, because unlike the Greek language, the Aramaic has the physics of the soul, while Greek doesn't. And his favorite example is that a lot of what Jesus says in Greek does not translate back into Aramaic. But what he said in Aramaic can be mistranslated into Greek. Now, for those of you who love the Greek, you could go call him up and fight with him. I'm not going to fight with you, I don't. The most important thing to me is forgiveness, not whether Jesus spoke Aramaic or not, or he's fluent in Greek or Latin. But what he does say is because of this confusion, Christians don't really have a sense of what forgiveness is except the Greek concept of letting someone off the hook. And the other thing, if you let me read this quote, this is from his website, Aramaicisms, it's his own word. So he's talking about Christ. What I said was, have Rachma for neighbor in order to maintain self. Rachma is a filter and gateway in the frontal lobes of the brain. So in your frontal lobes of your brain is something called Rachma. Rachma allows you to see the truth. It's a truth filter. And if you have the presence of Rachma, you can't go into unforgiveness. You can't go into hostility or fear. So Jesus is saying, well, let me finish it, sorry. The Rachma filters out intentions based in fear and hostility and only allows intentions keyed to love to be used by the mind as raw material. It is also a gateway for the entry of human life, love, in the human form. Without the presence of love, there is no human life. I did not say love your neighbor. It was more like be love in the presence of your neighbor in order to maintain self. What does that mean? Be love in the presence of your neighbor in order to maintain self. What is the old Bible quote? What everybody throws around.
Love your neighbor.
Love your neighbor as yourself. And so what Michael Rice is saying, no, that's wrong. Neighbor is anybody you bump into. Maintain your frequency of the newborn child with everyone you meet. When you leave that newborn child frequency, you're falling out of love. When you fall out of love, disease sets in. So every time you have an unloving response, you're diseasing yourself. And that disease then goes, from your auric space into your skin, into your muscles, into your organs, into your bones, right? When you have a disease in your bones, you're usually pretty dead. So Michael wants you to kind of change this. No. I'm radiating at a frequency of love, the nature's beautiful, oh God, I love my family, and then all of a sudden someone bumps into me and I fall out of that love and I'm angry or scared, right? So Michael says, how can you bring this Rachma? What to do? And so the example I like to show, who is someone around you that takes you out of love really quickly? What's the situation? Anybody married? Yeah?
Okay.
Any wife stories, husband stories? What takes you out of love? Think about it. Yes.
Well, I think that when I'm taken out of love is when I don't take care of myself. When I don't meditate, when I don't go for walks.
Sure. So
Then
you
it
can
takes me out of
maintain.
love, but if I take care of myself.
But what if you go for a walk and you lose your Rukma mind?
I'm feeling right now that if I'm taking care of myself more, I don't fall out of love so easily.
I don't disagree, but I want to know a case where you do. We're looking for gold. Don't tell me, I don't need to be like, sometimes I talk a little bit harshly. Don't tell me what a good person you are. Tell me what a bad person you are. You see what I'm saying? I want to know, oh, I have a friend I love to death. She doesn't hear what I say. I don't know why. She's not deaf. And then, if she was standing next to me, I'd kick her in the shins. Because like, no, I just told you. I just told...
Well,
Who has work to do,
but
me or
instead
her?
survival, we get into this survival.
No
and
explanation.
fear mode.
I need concrete examples of when you're taken out of love. So when my friend doesn't listen to me, I start getting angry for no reason. So what? Someone can't hear what I say. Why is that a problem? I want examples like that. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I'm divorced now, so I'm not.
Okay, let's go. These are important because this is the second half of this workshop. You've got to get your hands dirty. This is the dirtiness. Yes, tell me something.
It's one I'm working on right now.
Yeah.
When people use chemical laundry detergent,
It's
and I'm
fantastic.
forced to smell it.
Okay.
I can't, I'm having a hard time forgiving right now.
Okay, so she lost her expectation, right? And this is great because I'll be honest with you. You know, it's like I had that same thing. I had that same association with like some Tide or some stuff that made me itch, or the smell is too strong, or there's one in Chicago that everybody's Suavitel. When I smell it, I become violent, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's great because when you discover that, what the hell is it called when you wash your clothes? Thank you. A laundry detergent. When detergent sets you off, that's not bad. You've just discovered you have murderous impulses. They could be from Adam and Eve, or they could be from, you know, your grandfather was at war. He did things he shouldn't have done, or he should have done, but never recovered and passed that to your mom. Now your mom passed that to you. So where does this murderous aggression? Yeah, now listen. You know what I heard is a big bunch of nonsense are those DNA websites, because I figured, someone told me, he says, do the math. If you just go back like 1,000 years, you have something like connected to 2 million people before you, you know, so you could be related to anybody, right? So think about that. Just 5 generations of your ancestors did no work. Were you from Austria? Were they mercenaries? You know, I mean, if you think about it, I don't have to go far back to find murderers in my family. So I'm not surprised I have murderous impulses toward laundry detergent users, right? So, and it's normally just Suavitel, not Tide. But this is important. So Michael Rice would say, this is gold. This is not silly, because by learning to release. So okay, let's go through your example. And yes, Robert.
Well, I was going to give another example, but go
No,
ahead.
we'll go into your example because we have the next time. This is really the meat and bones of my presentation, is to get you guys to give your examples. They're human. And I used to be part of a group. We get on the phone once a week. I have friends that were thrown out of a window by their father when they're 12 years old. You know? So there's a lot to forgive. And you can't improve. It's about self-improvement, about self-love, unless you do this work. If you're not confronting your motorist impulses, where are they going? They're in your bloodline, and we're all related on some level, right? So what I hope to do is to get you guys to air out your laundry, whether it's here or at home with these sheets.
Literally.
Literally. Yeah, I love your example. You know, usually I have something like, you know, your boss passed you over for a promotion, you hate him. Why should you hate him? The other person was more qualified. Or, you know, you want to get to your feeling. So you have aggression. what would Prokofiev say the solution is to this problem? What would Rudolf Steiner say? What's the problem here?
Well, go back to yourself.
Okay, go back to yourself. So you have this murderous aggression against your neighbor using laundry detergent, right?
Well,
What do you do now? What's the next step? So you've recognized your expectation, right? Now what do? You've recognized your aggression. Next step. So now you look at yourself, right? But how do you, the murder is in your genes, it's in your brain. How do you get it out of there, according to Prokofiev? Because Steiner only tells you to love that person. So if he tells you to love that person, and Steiner is thinking, what dissolves that formation in your mind of aggression and murder connected to stinky things?
well, okay, so meditation, let the higher self come down, breathe through it, recognize that this is just an aspect of yourself and that's not you. And through this being present in the now and the breathing,
Yeah.
you will have created new pathways.
Right. So for Steiner, it's basically love the pupil. So you would bring love in here. For Prokofiev, it's basically your higher ego as its own intervening power. And for Michael Rice, he uses the Aramaic or Hebrew vocabulary. He has Rachma, Kuba, these different things. He says it's an elemental force that you can call upon to change basically your carbon-based memory, right? So your carbon-based memory, if it's passed down genetically through your ancestors or when you were a child, people treated you with murderous rage. When you misbehaved, right, and you learned, that's an acceptable response, right? So now you're working on that response. And then, how do you know when you've moved that aggression on? How do you know when the forgiveness works?
You know, I had an experience once just remembering an event with my father where he did something which I thought was unforgivable. And the process for me was that I went back. It wasn't just forgiving, you know, seeing the thing differently. It was seeing myself and him both innocent, both in pain that we did not know how to maintain, having no judgment, by asking for mercy for both of us.
Why not? You know, you're still
So it's a
asking
third
for mercy.
space.
You're still bringing, and you know, mercy. God, was it my Greek Kyrie?
Eleison.
Yeah. What more do you need, right? To a certain
But that was
extent.
the crucial piece, was to actually rise above the duality of him versus me and say we both entered into this and both of us were a part of it, equally responsible, and the only way out of it was to ask for mercy.
Right. And my thing with more Prokofiev and with Michael Rice is you're always asking for someone to intervene. Now, Michael Rice will also say, you know, if you love Kuan Yin, you know, it's an ascended master, she's great, have her come in, your deceased ancestors, if you're a Shintoist, whatever works for you. Now, Michael Rice emphasized he's a Christian, so he'll say basically this is related to the Christ energy in Aramaic form. But it doesn't matter from that certain point of view. Now, on top of it, since we're on this topic, there is a forgiveness energy, just as there is a love energy. So I would often get criticized for people who felt love was too romantic of a term. So you have to redefine it. So it's not like, I'm in love. No. It's a presence. It's an energetic presence love. It has nothing to do with my personal whim or wish. It's my choice to open up and to have this energy flowing to me. There's also, God provides a forgiveness energy. It just gets forgotten sometimes. Whether that's mercy for you or not, I don't know. You know, I don't know about those things. But I do know that when you can choose, bring in a loving energy, bring in the Christ energy. You know, Christ energy is not what people think. It's very aggressive. My Kaelic energy, people who make all sorts of stuff. People who really work with those energies know you don't play. Don't play with that till you're ready. You'll burn. You'll literally get burned. But with forgiveness energy, has a gentleness that those other energies don't have, and that's why it's provided by the heavens. Mercy, gentleness, all of that can clear your carbon-based memory so you're free. Going over the situation is important, because you know kind of what you're trying to erase. But the proof is as I'm asking her, how do you know when you're finished with the forgiveness process in this case?
I want to say something on this. This is
Yeah.
not a joking thing,
Yeah.
in case anybody's thinking that this is
No,
because
no.
I can easily forgive someone doing something really awful.
Right, because it's not
But
in your...
this feels like chemical warfare on my breath. Like I can't breathe in my yard. It's chemicals coming. So
Yeah.
I send love to these neighbors. I think I'm forgiving, and every time I smell it, it's like I go into that rage. So I am really truly asking. I don't know what that next step is for this one.
That next step is when you keep... Okay, I'll tell you a story. Yeah?
But that almost sounds like something happened at some point in your life while you were smelling that laundry soap.
Not necessarily.
Like something else may have happened.
That's the wonderful gift of humanities, we're as irrational as it can be. Whether her great-grandfather got allergic by some ancient soap in Ireland, I don't know. But some stuff, it's the rage that's key. The triggers are usually immaterial. I'm triggered by the way, don't look at me like that, I know the meaning of that look. How many times do you do that? I know it. I talked to my dad once. I go, Dad, why didn't you call me? I said, I thought you were mad at me. He goes, no, son, I have no phone etiquette. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, my colleagues always complain about it all the time. Right? So his lack of phone etiquette, he's from Brooklyn, right? I thought he was mad at me. Why? Because I'm always feeling sorry for myself. Nobody wants to talk to me. Right? It's my story. So you have to be careful, don't get too much in your head, go to the feeling. So when you're working on your rage with a soap, don't think that it's really the soap. Yeah, people get angry about dogs. All you have to do is read the newspaper how many children are dying unnecessarily at the end of a bayonet or having inoculated arms chopped off. I mean, there's enough horror in the world, but those don't make you lose your Rachma.
It's more of a violation.
Right. This is about you. If you don't work on your stuff, you can't be of service to anybody or the world. But if you move on, when you enter into that space of the laundry soap, you're going to have a different experience of yourself because you're going to be a different person because that carbon-based memory has been dissolved. And you can stay in that space of love. Every time you drop an issue, jealousy, anger, sadness, fear, your auric field changes color and expands. Any seer can see that. It's true, you know, I have a great person I work with in Hawaii. When I forgive certain things, she'll just smile at me. Why are you smiling? She'll go, you forgave that person. That's right. So it's a concrete, energetic reality that when you forgive the detergent, you let go of that murderous rage, oh my God, you're going to be attracting situations that instead of showing you who you are with your murderous rage, are going to show you who you are with your love. Right? You have to be very careful because if you have murderous rage, that means you can attract that equivalent in a boyfriend, in a situation. You ever have someone yell at you for no reason when you're driving on the highway? But when your field becomes developed and full, people can't enter your field in the same way. It's very rare. Someone yells at you, they'll lose their voice. If someone yells at you, they'll have chest pains. You start to build your field. The armor of Christ is not armor, it's light. So when that light develops a certain frequency, you're not going to find those same people coming unless they're coming for healing. They have to touch you is because they want to touch your energetic field, not because they want to steal your wallet. So you have to believe that these so-called silly things, irrational things, really give you deeper access to your whole bloodline. Right? You have a question?
I was just gonna say that's well and good and all, but you live in, what, Flint, Michigan, and your water's still gonna be polluted and you can't drink it. As much as you love the people who are in charge of bringing fresh water, what do you drink in the meantime?
Right, well, let me give you an example. I hate to use this
How do
example.
you breathe into your higher
Look at Donald
self
Trump.
when
You want to look for triggers, right? I'm not going to, I don't want someone dunking me in the pool or putting chemicals in my water, right? That's inappropriate, obviously. But the solution is not you radiating misery and anger, right? And if enough people stay together radiating misery and anger, well, they're going to be killed eventually. The world doesn't work that way karmically. There's a reason why there's war. And there's a reason They've done this study a million times, and I hate to bring it up, but there are always these equivalent, is like, they have perpetrators, and they'll pick victims out of pictures. They just know energetically that's a victim energy, and it's horrible to say, but on the good thing, if a victim knows that, they can change their energy. They can take responsibility, go into forgiveness mode, and make change. Otherwise, you lose your freedom. I mean, Prokofiev says, right? Everybody knows, you're an angel of freedom, so start acting freely. This is the way you free yourself from your baggage. How else are you going to do it if you don't act lovingly? Every chance you get, every test you have, every person you want to curse, go home, write it down, release the expectation. The waiter doesn't have to be my friend, but I also don't have to hate him just because he didn't do what I said, right? Yes?
So you put something in there that I think is really important, to come to the place of Rahma, forgive and make change. That's when you give a new kind of laundry detergent to the neighbours and say, would you like to try this? Or
I started
can I
with a
help you
letter.
understand?
A letter. No, a letter.
It's the make change piece.
But you're still trying, it's a new goal, maybe? But even if the key is the feeling. Let's say I dislike the laundry detergent my neighbor uses.
Yeah, I get that's gone.
As long as I'm not angry about it, I can act. So it's not so much about the change in the external world, is finding gems that, let's say if you and I are good friends, you never saw me lose my temper. But now I'm mad because, you know, my friend is washing their carrots with some new soap, and I think that soap is bad for the environment, killing the fish. I mean, there's so many things you can get mad at. But the key is to find gold in you. Are you jealous of your sister? Oh, I never thought of that. Look how I get. You know, and you have friends to inform you how you acted when you talk to your sister. You ever regress when you talk to your parents? Now, there's one thing to be regress because you are a child of your parents, but it's another thing to get out of sorts. And that's what you want to look for. A reaction that's really not loving. Yes?
You know, the other thing is that well, I'll just speak for myself, when I have an experience of contraction or resistance, in my best moment, and actually what I know is true, this is always an opportunity for me to strengthen my heart, like without exception. And so then I actually experience gratitude for that person. So it doesn't even become about the detergent. I mean, it is, because that's what's provoking me needing to expand my heart. But in that experience then of opening up to this person with no judgment about the detergent or whatever it is, I am in this expanded rebirthing of my heart, and then there's just gratitude for that person, and there's no thing about the detergent. It becomes irrelevant.
Right.
If not just pure gratitude. Like, thank you for that obnoxious detergent, because without that, I would have never had this experience of expanding my heart.
And gratitude is also kind of like if Plato said, you know, there's the good, then there's justice and all these other ideas that are connected to the good, you also have love and forgiveness, and then you have gratitude, which kind of, you know, you're forcing yourself to feel different. Like Schiller, I don't know if you ever read Schiller's aesthetic letters, he said, you should practice having feelings you don't want to have. You know, kind of Schiller was already doing this work in, I don't know, 1820s or before. So yeah, there's different versions. But what I would like, the reason why we're gonna turn to the sheets in a second, what I would like you to do is get in the practice of filling out the sheets. There's a certain honesty to really keep a pile of all the people you're working on in forgiveness. So when I first got this process, anybody have parents that were a little rough on the edges? Right? Best people to start with. You should honor your father and mother. Shame on all of you. Shame, 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 right? So you go to your parents first, and then you work out all your differences until you love them no matter what they did to you. What you think they did to you, by the way. Because a lot of things you think people did, they didn't do. Right? Nothing happens in a vacuum. So, let's go on to another example, and everybody turn to the sheet. Should be the second one. Does anybody need a little break? Are you okay?
Can you close all the windows?
Sure.
I'll show you.
And we'll do this sheet together. Does anybody have a new
We're not gonna
example?
open the window, we want you to feel bad.
Anybody have a situation? Turn to the sheet anyway. It's forgiveness sheet short version. You need one?
I have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
Before we move on real quick.
Yeah, no, take it.
I was wondering if you could explain what you were talking about, nothing happens in a vacuum. That struck me.
There's a terrible spiritual concept. For example, that you choose your parents. Not that you're better than your parents, but you're actually worse. So let's say you have a horrible habit. In one lifetime, you're verbally just really mean. Now you choose parents who are verbally mean. So you think, how did I get these parents? Listen to the way they're talking. Oh my God. You could learn right there. My parents talk inappropriately. I'm not going to do that. Or you'd say, I'm my father's son. Right? So there's some idea that you also attract, and Michael Rice will say, okay, you hate where you live, you get on the airplane, just before you get on the airplane, you're having a conversation about this thing, you fly to another city in LA where you're going to start a new life, and that conversation you finished in New York is begun again in LA. Why? Because you're going to meet the same people you need to meet to show you who you are. You're going to have the same type of girlfriend, the same situation, and you can try to avoid it or suppress it. That's what a lot of us do. Instead of really letting this bubble up and then see, oh, I have my work to do, we suppress. Oh, I don't need to forgive. I don't feel anything. You don't feel anything. That means you're actually below people who do. That's not an accomplishment not to feel anything. That means you have no access not only to yourself, but all of your ancestry. You're a spiritual zero. I'm sorry to be so harsh, because I have friends that had this argument that said, Nigel, you got to finish the sheet. You got to get to the point where you ask the angels or God to intervene in your life so you can learn about love. Don't tell me that, I realize now I was just being silly. No, you just found gold. Work on the feeling, dissolve the brain structures, and become loving. Don't talk your way out of it intellectually. This is not intellect. The lower ego has nothing to inform you about that's worth being informed about. Only the higher ego does. So when you understand that, you'll be thankful, as Nietzsche said, thankful for the bigger the enemy you have, the better it is for you, because it shows you how wonderfully strong and loving you are. Right? Mm-hmm. So there's another theory. Your greatest difficulty is also your greatest gift, and you'll always be working on that, right? So in terms of this work, some of the people you meet and the challenges you have is because you're up to it. You can do it. You can become more loving. Any questions? Everybody go to this. Can someone give me a situation that they have that they'd like to share, where they notice they have a very emotional reaction? Yes?
I'm a little reticent, but when you get angry, there's an inspiration. It's amazing to experience anger. The utility companies. I mean, person to person, and it's hand here, or the Goethe tells us that evil needs to evolve also. And so it's institutional. And lately I've had a major tangle with the utility company.
What's your expectation?
To beat them.
Okay. No. Okay, let's stick with this, because this is a communication issue, if I'm allowed to have a little liberty.
Whatever.
Okay, tell me your name again.
Raymond.
Raymond.
With an I.
Okay. Raymond, this is universal, Raymond. So you get on the phone.
No, sorry.
It's not.
They called me.
Okay.
And I put them on notice, don't ever call me again, send me anything in writing. It's very effective.
Okay. But where's your reaction? Where am I looking at? Where's your expectation that you're holding, and what feeling are you getting from that expectation?
I don't know if I follow your question, but by saying, by writing what I just said to them, to write to me, put something on paper that any and all parties can look at, and not words in the air that you can react to.
The words in the air are what you react to.
Not me, they were.
They were reacting to you.
Yeah.
So you want them to work on forgiveness with you.
Well,
you can force people.
It may be, I want to clear the problem up.
Okay, now that this is not problem solving. This is about your gold, your feelings that are dark. So if you look at the feeling chart in the back of your paper, you'll see that on the bottom half of the circle are the negative ones. No, I'm sorry, top half. Sleepy, bored, tired, lonely, depressed, ashamed, guilty, hurt, hostile, angry. So the top half is the stuff you want to work on. The bottom half, you don't need to do a forgiveness sheet. So, if you are secure, thankful, confident, discerning, valuable, you know what age my eyes are kind of, worthwhile, successful, surprised, you don't need to do a sheet. So, anybody else, give me a situation where you're triggered by someone you love or you work with. Don't give it, this is your chance. Don't be shy. Yes?
My brother,
I like it already.
okay, gets very upset with my daughter because of the life that she lives. And he wants her to have a different life. So we have a term in our family of like, he chewed her ass out last night. And then he called her back and apologized. But he has this, I get triggered when he reacts with rage. He gets angry.
Let's go through that.
Rageful.
So the situation, oh, we have this paper now. Let me just read this. We're going to use, can we use this? So you're angry. So the object is, what's your reaction to your brother? You become?
I feel as if he was stabbing me with knives.
But what do you want to do to him? What's your, so you're fearful? So he yells at your daughter. How do you feel?
I feel angry that he's yelling at her and he doesn't understand and accept her as she is.
So, everybody look at the sheet. I'll read the preamble. If I'm in pain, I'm in error. This is from Michael Rice, by the way. If I'm in pain, I'm in error. So, any pain you feel, that's your responsibility. Don't pass it off on the detergent, right? Right? That you got your work to do. I want to change the way I feel and react to others. I will cancel any goal I'm holding for the other person, place, or event. So what's her goal? How does she want her brother to behave?
Be nice.
Okay, right? So her goal is brothers should be nice.
Well, understanding and
Right.
patient.
So you're holding a goal for him. That's a fair goal. Everybody has that. I don't want people to do those things, right? I'm tired of blaming others for how I feel, and I will stop suppressing my pain, work on myself, and go through the symptoms of healing. Why the last line, go through the symptoms of healing? Oh, I'm sorry, the sheet number 2, the top. Here. Page 2. Next one, maybe. Oh, that's it? Oh, you're right. So, what Michael Rice is going to say to you, when you do these sheets, you're going to have a release if you're successful. If you're able to bring enough love in to your body, it could be, of course, some issues are harder than others. Some issues will go away with 1 or 2 sheets. Parents, in my case, I've done over 1,500 of these sheets on my mother over 15 years. You know, you guys don't need to do that because you didn't have the same family constellation, right?
Oh shit, I'm way
Yeah.
behind.
You're way behind. You got a lot of work to do.
That's my brother.
So, now, now my mom's a great case because my mom is an ending source of forgiveness sheets. She's never said one nice thing to me in my entire life. That's an achievement unto itself, I always say. Like, wait, remember you like, what's that movie with The Usual Suspects where he's going through all the details and he figures out, oh shit, anyway, it's a good movie. It reminded me of my own life. Now, why is that good, right? Because I have a lot of work to do, right? And my mom gave me an opportunity, and I didn't always take it on how to be loving. I didn't learn. I had to learn when I was in my 30s, was that 40s? How old am I now? Never mind. Anyway, in my 30s, I started this work, and I decided, how did I do it? I got on the phone. Hey, Ma, how are you? It would always start out okay, and I would be like, oh shit, I'm not ready. I'll be back later. And then I would sit in a cafe and do my sheets and my meditations, and then a month later, hey, Ma, how are you? Oh, man, the first 5 minutes, and then, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but you know what chording is? Chords? So normally, unfortunately, when we connect, especially parents and children, we send out energetic chords. They're like octopus strings. And when you clear up your auric space, it's a training unto itself, you can start to feel the chords very clearly. And you'll see people who don't want you to answer them, they'll chord your head. Your parents will chord you in the solar plexus, right? Because they can control you. And then you do a training, and the chording you'll start to feel on the phone. I was like, oh my God. So this really does lead to a wonderful sensitivity, because the chording has some, not symbolic meaning, has energetic meaning. I had a friend who said, those horrible New Yorkers, how do they relate to each other? New Yorkers relate out of the head and out of the lower chakra at the same time. And they hook everybody, that's how they feel each other. They look at you, are you a dummy? Can I sleep with you? Are you a dummy? Can I, right? And you go to other places, you go to the Midwest, there's more heartfelt stuff, right? So they're more here. I worked at a school, the Midwesterners were the only people in a meeting who listened to others. The Californians and New Yorkers knew everything. It was disgusting. I mean, I could do it according to the state borders. It was unbelievable, and I learned. We all have a different energetic presence, right? Yeah, so it's really amazing. And the forgiveness process hopefully will lead you also to start to feel the tapping of the chords, and you want to withdraw your chords from your loved ones. That's how we relate to each other. It's a very unfortunate thing. But let's go back to this. I'm sorry for the tangent. So the symptoms of healing. Line number 1. I think I'm upset. Everybody write my brother. Now, if you have a family member, but we're going to do this one together. Everybody put it in. You see line number 1? I think I'm upset because my brother.
What if you don't have a brother?
That's okay. You can join. Okay. If you do these work in groups, the sheets are stronger because you take group responsibility. Wherever 2 meet in my name, right? So you want to do this work in groups. There's no faster way to move on. You have the love of the whole group participating. Right? This is about basically love management, for lack of you in the corporate world, which I'm not.
Instead of trigger, you want us to write brother?
Well, the trigger is the brother. We're going to do this.
Brother?
My trigger, you could write. If you have another person, you can do this parallel.
My trigger, comma, my brother.
Yeah, don't worry about the grammar.
Thanks, you can teach me.
Yeah. So, I think I'm upset because my trigger, brother, you can put someone else. You don't have to follow hers, but we're going to do her example because it's so good. Then you put your initials. Why do you put your own initials?
Claim ownership.
That's right, because you're not talking about your brother, you're talking about yourself.
You're talking about your trigger.
No. You're talking about your trigger. But you are the trigger. Nobody makes you feel anything. That's what you got to stop blaming the world for how you feel. Not you
No,
personally.
my inner trigger.
Oh, your inner trigger, okay.
That's what I mean.
But put your initials there.
Okay.
Because you got to be clear that her brother's not doing a damn thing. Even if, yeah. So, what did he do to you?
Well, he's judging my daughter.
Put that down. He's judging my daughter. No, put it here.
I want to keep it blank because I want to use it.
He's not doing anything
I'll
to
give you
her,
another
but he's doing something to her daughter.
Right.
Are we all supposed to do the same thing?
You can, or if you have your own story, I just want you to fill it out kind of correctly, and then you can do your own top, or if you're already getting the principle, do your own situation. You have your own brother.
On the website at the top or no?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, don't worry, and you can always email me. Okay, one more time. I think I'm upset because my trigger, my brother, put your own initials, MR, Mark Riccio, did this to me. He criticized my daughter. how do you feel? I'm sorry, what's your name?
Patrice,
Patrice. Patrice, how do you feel about that in a word or two?
pissed off.
Pissed off. Everybody put that down. Pissed off. Now, in this is the simple version. In another version, I want you to tell us, you would say, how do I want to avenge myself? But this version is simple version. But yours is such a good story because, you know, sometimes when you're watching your brother do something to your kid, you're thinking about that movie like Batman where the guy hits the guy with a chair and the chair splinters. You know, people have those fantasies. Those fantasies are important. They're not meaningless. What do I want from my trigger? Positive things. Love, recognition, help. What do you want from your brother? So this is kind of your expectation. So she's angry at her brother. What's her expectation? What's her positive goal? How do you want what do you want from your brother?
I want him to have compassion and unconditional love for my daughter and trust her.
Okay, but what do you want from your brother? Love? Understanding? Because he doesn't understand, right?
Yeah,
Insight? Okay.
understand.
So what she wants, what her need from her brother is insight or understanding. Because he doesn't know, right, how to talk to his daughter. So put that there. This positive goal is very important. Because you go around, what's God's rule? God's rule is God loves you in spite of how bad the world is, and you love everybody else. You can't expect people to love you. I mean, it's nice when they do, right? So you have a goal, a positive goal for your brother. And that's the source of pain. Now, everybody, line number 4. I cancel my need in line 3 and cross it out. So you're intellectually just crossing out line 3. I invite a higher power, angel, Jesus, Buddha, Kuan Yin, deceased aunt, or your choice. So if you're an anthroposophist, you know, why don't you go with the best? You got spirit self, the angel Michael. To incline me toward healing, everybody check the box. Restore me to love, check the box. Assist me in keeping love present, and help in letting go of my painful reality. Why are those words important? So in line 5, you're asking for divine intervention. You should probably close your eyes and feel your mind. Feel if your request for intercession is working. Can you feel your spirit self entering your brain? Can you feel your brother in a new light? And this step is really important. It's not written down, but really stay quiet and feel if you can feel the change in your brain, or some kind of energy wherever you're holding that resentment is being dissolved. If you do these successfully, you'll become very ill sometimes. I went blind for 5 minutes. I've had stomach, headache, everything. Because what you put into your body in terms of resentment, when you release it, it has to come out the same way. So if you have angry thoughts, you feel sorry for yourself, when you release that, you have a physical reaction. And that's going to be another thing I'm going to ask you someday. You need to do master cleanse. You need to eat vegetarian as much as you can when you do this work. Master cleanse is the best thing on earth, right? Because where do you hold your liver? It's all your anger. The apple cleanse is excellent. When you start doing this work seriously, if you don't clear out your gallstones, you're in trouble. But you can always contact me at another time about that.
What do you mean by master cleanse?
Master cleanse is that maple, cayenne pepper, lemon. You eat nothing, you just drink that for 20 days. Your eyes change color and your tongue turns pink.
It would really be best if you get some cold medicine before you do that.
You can do that too, right? But I used to do that delicious salt water in the morning to cleanse that. Anyway, so I'll have to do a forgiveness sheet on that. I'm grateful to my trigger, my brother. Everybody put that down. And I join with a love in you. So now really see your brother in a loving light. Right? Because now all you do is